The 2015 report by the headhunters Jack Hammer Executive Recruitment has found that there's been a decline in the number of black South African chief executives heading up the top 40 companies on the JSE. This is the Moneymakers. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and tonight I'm joined by Debbie Goodman-Bhyat, Chief Executive of Jack Hammer in Cape Town, and Johann Redelinghuys, Chief Executive of Portfolio&Co and a headhunter of many years standing in Johannesburg, to find out what is causing the phenomenon. Debbie Goodman-Bhyat, lay it out for me in terms of your research, in terms of the drop-off in the number of black chief executives of big JSE-listed companies.
Let's really unpack that, because I think that's a very good point. When we look at the numbers in percentage terms, it looks like a phenomenon, but really what we're talking about is a very low base that we started off with when we first measured this data in 2012. And at the time, there were only 3 or 4 black executives of the top 40 listed corporations, and we decided to wait a little to see if there was any progress being made, and we took another view in 2015. The research was commissioned to an independent research company called Merchant Tech, and they once again took a look at the data. And really what we're seeing is that when you have a low base to start off with, when 1 or 2 individuals are either retire or resign, you have this phenomenal drop-off.
So you've only got to have the departure, for example, of Sizwe Nkosana at First Rand and Peter Matlare from Tiger Brands, the imminent departure of Peter Matlare, and suddenly half of the black chief executives on the JSE have disappeared.
So I think that when we're comparing apples with apples, it really is a very small number to start off with, and the point and the objective of the whole survey really was to try to measure progress. And at the end of the day, you can't change what you don't measure. And this kind of data is not necessarily looked at from a big picture point of view. And I was curious. We constantly get organizations who we're trying to help them fill those key executive roles with black professionals, and we're trying to see, okay, so where is the progress being made? And so this time we took a look at not only the CEOs of the top 40 listed corporations, but also the boards and the executive teams reporting into those CEOs, in order to see, okay, is there batting order, is there substance, and even if the numbers are not looking great now, what is the likelihood of progress and real transformation going forward? So we're trying to look a bit into the transformation crystal ball, so to speak, and try and make some predictions around the future.
Debbie, when you look at the number of potential black recruits in your books, people looking for work and looking for opportunities, is that number growing disproportionately to the number of opportunities that might be available to them in the corporate sector?
The thing is that we are never really engaging with people who are actively looking for jobs. I mean, we're executive recruiters, we're headhunters, so we're always dealing with people who have already got a good job somewhere, and we're hoping that for some very good reason they'd be open to considering something new. I think what we're seeing is that there is a very consistent and very high demand for top black executives, and a lower supply. And that's not just black executives, that's women as well. Organizations are under tremendous pressure to transform and to ensure that their executive teams have a measure of diversity. And so we're certainly seeing that there's an absolute push for the best people, the best black and female individuals that they can attract. On the other hand, we're certainly encouraging black executives to manage their careers well, and this idea of job hopping and short tenure, we really need to guard against that. So you've got demand and supply, and individuals who really should be looking after their careers and not just moving for the next opportunity that comes their way, because the reality is that they are in fact going to be approached regarding new opportunities all the time.
Johann Redelinghuys, your perspective on this. I mean, Debbie Goodman-Bhyat, they've done the research, it was done by Merchant Tech, and the numbers are there. The numbers are there for everybody to see, that the South African corporate sector is not transforming at nearly the sort of rate that might have been hoped in the heady days of the Rainbow Nation and the sort of the post-election settlement of 1994.
Well, it is transforming. It's transforming on boards. Debbie referred to boards. There are not enough, but there is a substantial number now of black chairmen and black board members. It's in the CEO ranks where the biggest problem exists. So
why?
It's very hard to. Well, there's a good reason. a substantial number of the really competent people who would normally be chief executives are choosing to start their own businesses, their own empowerment businesses, and to go on to 2 or 3 or more boards rather than have the somewhat arduous responsibility of being the chief executive and being held to account for a single company. There's more flexibility in having a couple of board appointments and then some investments in a black empowerment initiative.
Debbie Goodman-Bhyat, is it that simple?
Look, I really don't think that it's simple at all. I think there are so many different facets to this situation. I think it can boil down, if you really dig down deep, it can boil down to why is there not enough substance coming through the ranks, and that goes down even further if you really unpack it to the education system, really. You know, so I think that there are so many different issues impacting the idea of slow transformation. And while I absolutely agree with Johann that we're definitely seeing transformation in terms of the boards and chairmen, when we look at the actual executive directors, individuals actually working in those top 40 listed corporations, reporting directly to the CEOs, I think the numbers there really do speak for themselves, and they're sitting at the time of the research, 21% black executives, black South African executives. And I think the point, one of the interesting things that has come out of the research is really looking at the types of roles that those individuals are occupying, and there we're seeing that individuals, black executives, actually managing core business roles, taking on core business roles, those numbers are really quite small. I mean, we're seeing only 10% of the executive layer actually in influential core business operational functions.
So often, Johann Redelinghuys, I mean, you look at the HR director of the firm, it happens to be black, for example. It's those non-core roles that Debbie Goodman-Bhyat refers to. These are not big decision-making roles in the strategic drive of the business. HR is important, yes, but these are not people who are operational heads. They're not running a country, for example. They're not running a division of 5,000 people, which is kind of one of the building blocks toward becoming a chief executive at some point in the future. And it doesn't bode well for a transformed business sector or chief executive layer in the next 10 years, does it?
I think that the occurrence of black people being appointed to head of HR and head of corporate communications, and I think that was very much a trend like 10 years ago.
Still very much in place, surely.
It's kind of, but people are getting out of it. Let me just say that there is enormous goodwill wherever you speak to people about the need for transformation. It's not like people are resisting.
Are people paying lip service to it?
I don't think so. I think people really do, but people want it, you know. I think people want it.
But then there's a problem in the supply chain then.
There is a bit of a problem in the supply chain, but there is also a problem in the motivation of, you know, many of the people from previously disadvantaged backgrounds in places like Soweto would much rather have seen their future in a Kentucky Fried Chicken franchise or something like that franchise rather than being a chief executive of a business. They don't come out of homes where business leadership was the thing. It was being an entrepreneur and making money. But there's a
world of opportunity now. And
there is.
For some reason, Debbie Goodman-Bhyat, that world of opportunity is either not being grasped or it is being held away. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day who said the trouble with transformation in corporate South Africa is once a black executive gets on the corporate ladder, they pull it up after themselves just so they don't face competition in the boardroom. I objected to the statement being made in that way because I said, come on, that can't be possible. And my Twitter feed went completely mad, suggesting that it may in fact be fact.
I would probably also go a little mad on that because I disagree. I think that actually having black executives in all different layers of an organization creates in fact a very positive snowball effect. And I think one of the hardest transitions to make is for an organization that consists of mostly the same type of demographic to make those first small steps to appointing black or female executives. And then after those first small steps have been taken, I think really then it becomes an accepted way of doing things, and the snowball keeps rolling. And I mean, if you look at, for example, organizations like Vodacom and MTN, they've got incredibly transformed executives.
I was going to raise them as cases in point. I mean, if you look at businesses with a multiplicity of cultural groups, racial groups, of genders in boardrooms, the cell phone companies seem to have got it right on that level.
Yes, and I think that there are a couple of things that have been in those organizations' favor. They're relatively younger organizations. They've also been very heavily regulated from the start, and they haven't had to deal with legacy issues. So they've started off on a really strong footing regarding transformation. And if you look at those, the executive makeup of both of Vodacom and MTN, I mean, they're the poster children for great transformation. You see that you've got black executives and women in all manner of different types of roles. Those companies are very successful, they're very well transformed, and they're essentially really almost got a head start on organizations that were established many decades ago and have had legacy issues and entrenched ways of doing things that have been much harder to shift.
Debbie Goodman-Bhyat, the Chief Executive of Jack Hammer in Cape Town. I'm going to let you go. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Johann Redelinghuys, let's wrap up with you. Post-democracy, maybe just even pre-democracy, the great supply chain of black talent came in many cases through the multinationals, through the Lever Brothers of the world, the General Motors and Procter & Gamble's. These were the great training grounds, and so many of the people that we've seen move into SAB Miller and do very well, move into MTN and Vodacom, as Debbie mentioned, have come out of those networks.
True.
Do those still exist?
They still exist, and they do come out of those networks. But before we end on a negative note, you know what we should take courage from? Brian Joffe of Bidvest has just organized for his new 3 companies to be chaired by a black woman.
I mean, but we're still getting the executive roles done. We're still not getting the executive roles here. Johann Redelinghuys, is there a way to deal with it, or is it simply a long and slow and quite painful evolution?
The latter.
There we go. Johann Redelinghuys, we'll leave it there. He's Chief Executive of Portfolio&Co. He is a headhunter of many years standing, and Debbie Goodman-Bhyat, who's with Jack Hammer in Cape Town. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you for watching. There'll be more Moneymakers tomorrow. Till then, good night.